How's it going, everybody? This is Ketchup here, and I'll be the first to admit, it's been a while since my last video. That is because I had to prepare and then go to the Brazilian offline pro competition event last weekend. And it took up quite a lot of my time. I had to kind of recover when I got home, rest up, and importantly for content, really, test out the new patch and a bunch of the changes, specifically for Quan, who's my favorite character. Now, I've had my tea, it's the morning, I'm rested. It's time to talk about just how different this character really is, because we've seen some of the stuff that this character can do, but I think some of the stuff I'm about to show you today, you may have never seen before. And I have to admit, I've been getting a lot of success with it online. The moment the new stuff is applied, a lot of opponents do not seem to know what to do, which for Quan is always wonderful news. But let's talk about the changes first, and then we'll talk about the most significant change in a new move a little bit later. So, first of all, let's talk about some of the more simple changes. The first one, and definitely useful, is that the EX down back 3 is now up for longer. This is the move that forces the opponent away from you, and it can, control their movement, really. This being up for longer just helps you defensively more than anything else. They did not change any of Quan buttons, it was just special moves. So, he still has his bad pokes. However, one of the defensive maneuvers was down one into this to kind of constantly create some distance that you can then fight back and do something else, right? So, the fact this move is up for longer is only ever a good thing. Now, secondly, the Bone Cage. This move would not come out on block before, now it does. So this animation on hit, we're very familiar. If I set the opponent to block all, and I now do the Bone Cage, it will come out, regardless. And it will restrict their movement for a short time. This is mostly useful for the zoning, more than anything else. But anything into Bone Cage will come out, they'll be stuck. This applies to EX Bone Cage as well. And again, it just creates an obstacle that they have to deal with. All the while, it kind of blocks some projectiles and creates some weird situations for them. So, kind of small, you would think on paper, but actually overall a pretty good change, and one that is definitely welcomed. Now, these are mere small changes in the grand scheme of things, because there is a new move he was given that has kind of transformed this character. The new move in question is what they call Zone of Waste. If you look at the bottom right of your screen, you'll notice that a little bit of meter is being drained from them. If you do the enhanced portal, it is up for longer and will drain even more meter. It doesn't drain a lot though, so my first thought seeing this move was, I don't know how good that's going to be from a meter drain sense, because it barely takes anything. How can this be good? It became apparent very quickly that the meter drain is not the main hook of this move. What is the main hook is that when you use Zone of Waste and the opponent stands in it, it's kind of a reverse Sorcerer Quan from MKX, where in this time, if the opponent is standing in the spell for long enough, Quan glows kind of like a white, a yellow, and while he has the glow, he will have a hit of armor. So the easiest way to demonstrate this, let me just go Control Player 2. So when Quan starts to glow, he gets a hit of armor. Now, it is only one hit of armor, so it's not like he's going to just power through everything. 1-2 will still hit him if he's not blocking. But that one hit can make a pretty significant difference, because it can be the decider between you powering through an opponent's attack or not. Now, the big thing about this move, and the biggest thing that I notice about it, is that when you do the enhanced Zone of Waste, you would have noticed that it's up for significantly longer. The fact that it is up for longer means that if you pay attention to Quan here, he glows once, he's going to glow twice, and there is a third time here, giving Quan up to 3 hits of armor if the opponent is standing in Zone of Waste the entire time. This is a very big deal, because there are so many instances where Quan has armorable gaps, or he has, minus frames that the opponent might try and press a button, or power through, or take what they think is their turn. This armor changes the game completely. And I'll show the applications, and I actually recorded a lot of this in Kombat League the day after I got home, because I wanted to test how viable this really was, and I gotta say, I think it's pretty damn viable. Now let's talk about Sub-Zero and how you can apply the Zone of Waste, because there are, everywhere on the screen, true Zone of Waste setups thanks to Sub-Zero. I think other cameos might be able to do it, but Sub is the most basic of the applications that I've found so far. So looking at Sub-Zero and Quan, like if you've ever watched like Super on YouTube, for example, you'll know that there's Sub-Zero there that Super likes to do. You might have seen this setup before, where it's forward 4 freeze, EX cage, and then forward 4. Knocks them into the cage, creates a situation, whether it's a low, whether it's a grab. This has been kind of like the staple of this variation from a setup point of view. This has become only more deadly because of it. I wouldn't say devastating and deadly at the same time, and those words kind of just got put into a blender. Funny how English works. If you try and go for any kind of combo, you can still special cancel after bone cage, right? So if I do something like back 3, EX cage, forward 3 zone of waste. Now, if the opponent were to block that back 3 and try and armor, the armor activates at the perfect time. It's kind of hard to demonstrate this in training mode. I think the easiest way would be to perhaps set the AI. I mean, I'm going to try this on the fly, really. I could get this completely wrong. I think that's good. I've only ever tested this against real opponents, so doing it myself is a bit weird. You want to delay your button so that by the time the gap appears, you're armored. And you can punish accordingly. Obviously, if I was quicker on the recording, I would have punished it. But the bottom line is that you do these kind of situations where you wait after the bone cage because you have to wait for the armor to regenerate. And that is one big part about doing this setup, is just knowing, right, when do I time my button? And I'll try and show this a little bit easier for you now. When you do Zone of Waste, you'll notice it takes a couple of seconds for the armor to become active. And you need to be aware of that timing, because that timing is everything. It's the difference between getting hit before the armor and having the armor active when you want it, so you can punish the opponent for making a mistake. In a lot of these instances, and by the way, this one setup, and I say one setup because there are a few, works off any hit. Any hit at all. I waited too long there. Kind of struggling to talk and do it at the same time because it's a little bit complicated. Forward 4 Zone of Waste, and all of a sudden now we have these kind of situations that should my gap appear, the armor is active, and even if they wait, I'll still have enough time when the armor is there to get like a back 3 on block or something else, and it all kind of works together. It's very hard to simulate this, so I will be having clips from Kombat League kind of in this video to really demonstrate the idea while I'm talking, so don't worry if different gameplay appears on the video, but it's important to show you. That is layer 1, really, is just forward 4 into Zone of Waste, knocks them into the bone cage, creates a situation, and now you're armored and can apply some kind of mix-up. The big thing, and the biggest thing, in my opinion, is that the bone cage is used mid-screen to simulate a somewhat corner experience where the opponent has limited movement options. They can, of course, jump away from Zone of Waste. They can move away if you just use it on its own. They can dash, they can move. Yes, Quan can steer the cage, he can steer the spell, but that's only going to work so much. It's good, but it only works so much. When the opponent's in the corner, however, they have no such escape, which means instant Zone of Waste, you wait a minute before doing forward 4, I'm now armored as the opponent is standing up. And that is a different story altogether. If you do the EX version of Zone of Waste, it's up for basically triple the time, and this is where it gets absolutely ridiculous. So again, I'll be showing clips just sort of at the same time here, but all of a sudden, nothing becomes a risk, because you have armor the whole time, and you can do whatever you want, as long as you keep the mental timing of the Zone of Waste. That is one thing I have to really push here, is that if you're trying to loop the opponent in the corner, and I will demonstrate how you can loop it. So let's say I've hit the opponent mid-screen, I do the setup, EX bone cage, Zone of Waste. Let's say they just get hit here. As long as you have meter to do so, and the cameo available, this whole thing is loopable. Didn't quite have enough there for Sub-Zero, but should I have done even one extra stagger, for example, I would have had a third Sub-Zero, and I have looped it 3 times before. And you're building a lot of meter the entire time, and that's an extra benefit to this setup. So being able to loop the Zone of Waste is kind of where the ridiculousness comes from. And again, I must reiterate, this works off any launch, so if I set the opponent to, let's go movement mode, jump forward, right? If you anti-air them, again, the whole setup, you wouldn't do this setup mid-screen. or in the corner, sorry. But just to demonstrate the idea, you know, the opponent's set to jump, and they will constantly get hit. So it's not like they can just jump and get out of it. If they were to jump with an attack, they'll get hit. If they try and do a basic attack on the ground, they'll get hit. But I'm just trying to sort of, at the moment, simulate that should you anti-air somebody, again, with the Sub-Zero cameo in particular, you can constantly do this. In fact, now the jump-in's done, if I had my timing a little bit better, I would have been able to do another Zone of Waste there. So as long as you're keeping a mental timer of when the Zone of Waste is active, you're in a pretty decent situation. Now, this is not like the most broken thing in the game by any stretch, and Quan Chi's offense does not reflect that of Mortal Kombat X, where he had unseeable launching overhead low mix-ups, which could complement the armor in a way that made it one of the most broken variations in history, in my opinion. He doesn't have the same offense. However, he does get these guaranteed situations that become more of a vortex, because when they hit the opponent, you loop them back into the exact same setup. And this is the final layer of the setup I want to demonstrate in the mid-screen, because if you want to simulate a extended mid-screen but corner experience, that is where you spend a little bit more meter. So let's say I've hit the opponent here. I have to turn them off all block. If I hit the opponent and I do any launch, you do EX Bone Cage, EX Zone of Waste, and now it's up for way longer. Now, it is going to vanish at some point, you know. At some point, the cage is going to disappear and the opponent's going to have opportunities to move and escape. But this is the extra side to this setup that I want to talk about. And it might be kind of hard to simulate this. I've never really done it in training. Again, it all comes from real matches, testing all of these setups. If I control player 2... actually, no. It's best to control... Yeah, keep controlling player 1. And I will wait a split second. There you go. There you go. So if you're steering the Zone of Waste in that instance, you would drop out of the combo, and you would actually punish Scorpion on hit for that, because it would count, technically count as him dropping the combo, essentially. So, again, hard to demonstrate that one in training mode. You really need to sort of play in a real match and test moving this around to really get the experience. I don't believe I have a clip of that one, but I have been doing it yesterday and, you know, a bunch of the day before. But let's kind of just talk about now. We'll have some clips in the background of me doing this against people. And we'll talk about what this is giving Quan. This is giving Quan a completely different layer of offense. And that is a really, really big deal here. And the reason being is that now, all of a sudden, Quan's low health makes a little bit more sense. Like, he still has his bad defensive options. Skydrop is still not a great armored move. He has the worst low pokes in the game. He doesn't have a decent mid. Like, he does have all of those issues still. He has gaps after the first hit of every one of his major strings. However, the second the armor is applied and done in such a way that the opponent must hold it, that's a very different story, because all of a sudden, very few mix-ups, unless the opponent has the right, like, armor-breaking option, they don't really have a lot of options to shut that down. And when you have the enhanced version of the Zone of Waste, it becomes even more devastating, because all of a sudden, you're now building up to 3 hits of armor that can punish the opponent on a hit. It can do all sorts of crazy different things, and, importantly, the opponent is having their meter drained. Now, I said at the beginning of this video that the meter drain wasn't a huge deal because it was slow. What it is perfect for doing is constantly denying the opponent's ability to break. Because remember, you need 3 bars to break, and if you have 98% of your meter full, you can't combo break. The meter drain of Zone of Waste does such a good job of taking just enough meter while they're getting comboed to always prevent the break. It's also going to always prevent the activation of another Zone of Waste, or prevent another hit from being broken. And I've had situations where I've set this up and just hit the opponent with a hit confirm into Fatal Blow, and it's been guaranteed because, again, again, they never have the right amount of meter. So while you're constantly doing this element of like a set play situation versus the opponent, they can't break any of it, and they can't stop you from applying it again and going in again to do the exact same kind of situation. And the fact that even if it goes wrong and you take a hit, you can still steer the zone of waste becomes even scarier. Now, this is not the greatest thing in the game. This is possibly, maybe, still not Quan Chi's best pairing. I wouldn't know. I haven't played enough of this setup to really get that idea. But with Sub-Zero in particular, you can get it from every single possible hit. The final thing I'm going to demonstrate, and some of you might be wondering, what if you hit 2-1-4? You know, what if I hit 2-1-4 versus the opponent? Because that's a little bit different. That's a string that you might use on the ground. You can't really confirm anything besides a standing freeze, so how does Quan possibly get the setup from that? Well, Mustard taught me this one, taking a page out of the Cyrax book, using a very similar application. Should you do 2-1-4 freeze, instant dash forward, bar EX, 2-1-4 zone of waste, you knock them into it, and the setup has applied once more. So this is just another way of getting it. If you hit 2-1-4 on the ground, dash in, bar EX cage, 2-1-4 zone of waste, they get knocked into it, and once again, it's party time. Should they get hit, loop it, EX, forward 4 zone of waste, once again, party time. We're going to do whatever we want. Should they get hit, again, loop it, EX if you had it, and again, you just continue to just chain it, chain it, chain it. And if you have just a little bit of health left to do for the end of the round, and you have 2 bars, you can, you know, play a little bit risky and go for your EX. So you'll land a hit on the opponent, forward 4 freeze, EX cage, forward 4 EX zone of waste, and now all of a sudden this is up forever. And if I get hit, I can just simply steer this while I'm getting comboed, and it might break the combo and allow me to punish them regardless. Overall, I think this is a really fun, decent variation, and I call it a variation, cameo pairing. And it's something that I personally have been really enjoying in the online space. And I gotta say, I've been having decent results with it. I mean, I haven't been unbeatable. I've definitely lost online, but it's been really fun to play this totally new way of a character that I was really looking forward to. And you know me, I played Sorcerer Quan for many years in Mortal Kombat X, and it feels like a variation of that when I play it here. So hopefully you've learned something new today, a different form of Quan Chi perhaps, and if any Quan Chi players hadn't seen this before, give this a go. You'll have a great time. Thank you so much for watching. I know this video might be a little bit longer, but hey, look, there's a lot of tech to go over here, and there's a lot of depth to this cameo pairing. So hopefully you learned something, hopefully you enjoyed it, and it's nice to be back. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.